Hi, I'm Frances Brown. I'm a freelance consultant and trainer, and I've worked over the last 2 years working with the Home Truths 2 team. This work has really been about naming what's going on in civil society around race equity and helping organisations face it, not just with words, but with actions. So let's be honest, all of that stuff, the murder of George Floyd, the rise of Charity So White and COVID, it created a moment where anti-racism wasn't just a side issue, it became front and centre. And for many of us, that felt very hopeful. Boards, the leadership teams, and hadn't shown much interest. Were asking questions. Conversations that have been pushed aside for years were finally being heard. People were saying, "We want to make a difference. How do we do that?" So for me, it was a tipping point. Those who'd been comfortable with the status quo couldn't hide behind inaction anymore. It was all up front and centre. But I also recognise that many, including myself, were a bit sceptical. What does this mean in the long term? Because while the public statements were really bold, the real structural changes were often minimal. So there's a lot of urgency that kind of faded once the spotlight had dimmed. Still very much a hunger. There's a committed core of people who understand that equity isn't about a nice to have or a nice photo of a diverse board. They understand that it's about power. It's about who has it, who doesn't, and how it's shared. And so that's really encouraging. There's lots of demand and desire for it still to for us still to have a much more equitable civil society. And all of that's good. All the right things are being said. But my experience is often that the most dangerous resistance today is quiet. It's not people shouting no to anti-racism. That seldom happens. But it's about leaders who nod along, they say the right things, and then nothing actually changes. It's a board that recruits for diversity, but doesn't do anything about its culture and leaves that untouched. So it still doesn't feel like a comfortable and safe space to be. It's trustees who say yes to inclusion, but as long as that doesn't make us feel uncomfortable. So there are neutral delays, but they're not neutral because they're comfort-based decisions that block justice. So while I think that there has been advancements, not as much as we need, and not enough for me to say, "Hey, well done, you've done a really fantastic job." It's you've picked up the mantle, but there's more. There's more to do, and bringing somebody in like myself isn't enough. You can bring somebody in like me to guide you, but you have to take up the mantle yourself and put those things into action. When I'm gone, what's happening? When people like me come into your organization and we leave, what happens after that? So for me, silence sometimes is a bit about complicity. If you're silent and you're not taking action, then you're complicit in the problem. So there's a worrying drift that I see EDI as is being treated as competing priorities. So at one point it's anti-racism, then it's about the LGBTQ plus agenda, then it's about a different agenda, and that doesn't really help. That's not very constructive. It feels like the oppression Olympics. Who's at the front of the race at this particular moment? So I've seen organisations that have built their EDI strategies on the back of anti-racism as a consequence of what happened in 2020 and the murder of George Floyd. But yet, when you look at the concrete action that they've taken around equity, very little of it has been around anti-racism. They've made the big shifts in other areas. So yeah, it's on the radar, but knowing it matters is not the same as doing something about it. So that's where I'm at. I want to see us do something about it. I had a conversation not that long ago with somebody who said, sometimes you come from a slightly negative perspective, and maybe that's true. But the thing is, when the glass is half empty, I can talk about the bit that's full, but the bit that concerns me is the bit that's not. And unfortunately, we keep to being in a bit of a cycle where we make some progress, and then we think we've done a good job, and then we regress and we go back. And I think that we're in real danger right now in 2025 of regressing on any of the advancements that we made in 2020. So here's where I will bring in some optimism because change is still possible. I absolutely believe in that. If I didn't, I wouldn't be doing what I do. But it all starts with us being honest. So if we're serious about equity, if civil society is serious about equity, well, number one, it needs to stop recruiting leaders and trustees who don't really believe in it or see it as optional. The amount of times I've seen leaders recruited and then they want people like us to train them in how to be equitable. You need to recruit people who are in that space already. We can help you with the rest of your organization, but your leaders really need to get this and understand it. And we can support them to support the rest of the organization. But you cannot create racial equity with people who are content to leave society exactly as it is. So change is possible. We also have to face the central problem, which is that people of colour are still poorly served by civil society, even in terms of the services that they receive. Outcomes are worse, needs are unmet. Many don't even see our organisations as places that they can turn to. And so this should tell us something about where the gaps really are. Um, but the good news is we can change it and we know what needs to be done. And it's people who are brave enough to get uncomfortable. It's boards making decisions that reflect equity and not just the optics. It's organisations who move beyond statements and bring things into their lived practice. And it's also about individuals making personal commitments to shift their own behaviours because it's not just a policy. I've gone into lots of organisations, written policy, but if behaviour doesn't change, then it doesn't really shift things. And yes, it will be hard, but it's also where transformation happens. And so, where do I see my role in this? Well, I'm a bit of a mirror. I'm a bit of a truth teller. I'm happy to be uncomfortable. I'm happy to what's the word? To shake things up and affect the status quo. And so people who want to have a very nice, safe space where safe means that you don't question what's going on in the organization, people's behaviors, and the things that need to be done to change the status quo around race equity. They're probably not the kind of people who want to work with me. But if you want somebody who's going to be diplomatic and supportive and helpful, but will tell you the truth and will guide you on the path, then that's my role. So that's where I see myself as a bit of a guide and a bit of a mirror to where we could do better. Okay, so here's what I'm saying to myself and to anyone else who wants to see a different kind of civil society. And what I'm saying is keep going. Take rest when you need it, regroup, but don't retreat. The question, the stories that you tell yourself, what do you really believe about equity? Then look at your board, your leadership, your culture, your teams. Are you performative or are you being transformational? And finally, don't just try to do it on good vibes and guesswork. Get help, use data, build skills, and start to learn really about sharing the power. Because yes, there are truths that are uncomfortable, but the future we're trying to build is something that we can be hopeful about. For more about Home Truths, do follow the link below and you can find more content from Home Truths 2 and the Race Equity series.